All right, everyone, I just got back from my first GT ride. We got a lot to talk about. Here we go.
Welcome to RTA Motorsports.
All right, everyone, so in this video, you're gonna see a lot of riding footage, and I'm gonna let you know kind of what I am going through and what I'm feeling as I'm riding. I literally just got back right now from this ride with the GT, but also stay tuned to the end of the video. I have some interesting points I'm gonna make as far as comparisons between my XR and the GT. Here we go. All right, here we go. The very first steps on the Onewheel GT. Now you can kind of see I made a little bit of face there when I first engaged that sensor, and it's because I was pleasantly surprised that the sensor actually engaged very quickly and very responsibly. The board didn't like surge forward or anything like that. There was no dipping of the nose or kind of feeling like, is this going to engage or not? It just immediately engaged at a proper moment where I felt completely comfortable. I was actually surprised because on my XR, I kind of feel like I have to tilt it forward, and I'm kind of hunting whether or not it's actually going to engage or if I'm just going to, you know, fall off the front. But you're going to see here, I'm just kind of getting used to what the board feels like, trying to get used to what that profile of the tire feels like, and also getting used to the foot pads. The foot pads are now concave, both front and back. I don't have the love hump rear pad or anything like that. Currently on my XR, I do have the Float Life's urethane rear pad, the wide pad, and I do run with fish bones on the front, so I am used to a concave front foot pad of some sort. So I'm just kind of getting a feel for everything here. Nice slow strolling. I think I'm going probably around maybe 13 miles an hour. Okay, so the first thing that I really noticed was the foot pads, the concave foot pads. You definitely can feel them, you definitely notice them. And again, being that I run a Float Life concave wide rear foot pad on my current XR and fish bones on the front, this is something that I'm completely used to. But the one thing that I do gotta say here is that the front concave pad is not as aggressive or is not as concave as running fish bones on a stock flat pad. There is like a bowl on the outer aspects of the pad, but the very middle, I would say there's probably about a 4 or 5 inch, maybe 4.5 inch wide section area that is still completely flat. It's a big square flat area and everything dishes up from the side, and you do feel that. You also, because of the design of the pads and the pads kind of angle in, you do have like a sharper edge all the way around, although I didn't really feel that to be too much of an issue. And you can see through some of the trail riding we're going to do in a moment that it really doesn't become an issue. I never really felt uncomfortable. I never felt like it was digging into my heel or anything. Maybe if I was doing some pretty gnarly drops or anything like that where my foot may be slightly off the pad, that could probably become an issue. Maybe be a little bit uncomfortable, especially with, you know, wearing Vans with a very minimal sole on the inside. But as far as this ride here and what I experienced, the concave front and rear foot pads were very reminiscent to what I'm already used to, and I do gotta say I do love having concave foot pads, especially that front sensor straight from the factory. It's gives it a lot more control, a lot more of a comfortable, stable feeling to me, especially being that that's already something I'm used to. But the foot pads are also plastic, and we'll kind of go into that in just a little bit more as to what that means. But you can see here I'm kind of just chilling out. I didn't realize, and I looked at the app in a little bit here, but I didn't realize that section that we were just kind of cruising down, I hit 19 miles an hour. Now, I have never ridden that fast on my XR. My fastest was 18.1, I think, miles an hour. Absolutely insane, the power and the stability behind this board. but we're going to be taking it on the trail here. Now, this is a loop I love to do. Now, I haven't been here for a long time, and there's a lot of new features and a lot of things that have changed on this trail here. So I'm not really trying to beat any land speed records or anything like that here. But I do got to say, riding this trail again felt great, especially on the GT. Coming up that hill, I felt like I could definitely push it a lot further. Now, the board does have a safety beep that if you're pushing it too hard, it will beep at you when you start reaching the limits of the board. Not necessarily pushback. More so, I'm guessing it's probably like a torque setting. I'm not really sure, but a lot of people are reporting that they hear it more so going up hills or maybe over accelerating too fast. Anything that may be pushing that nose down faster than it can actually, or more than it can actually overcome. Now, up that hill, I was expecting to hear the beep. I didn't hear the beep at all, so I guess I could push it more, and it definitely felt like I could push it more. Now, the one thing that I really, it's hard to describe, but with this board here, I feel a lot more confident. And I guess it's because now I actually have pushback that I could feel, and that's actually responsive to me, and I could actually learn the limits of the board. But also the way it accelerates and how responsive it accelerates really tells me and gives me feedback as to what the board's doing. I always felt like with the XR that I'm kind of, and it has to do a lot with experience, but I always felt like I was kind of guessing what the limits of the board were, and I'm always just feeding in a little bit. I hit the grass with the camera a little bit there, but I'm always feeding in a little bit of input, hoping that I don't get a nosedive or anything like that, and I'm always kind of guessing what the limits are with the board. And that's kind of why I love my XR, but kind of why I was always a little bit nervous to push my limits with the board. But with this one here, when I accelerate, it accelerates. When I try to climb a hill, it climbs a hill. And there's a lot of good feedback between me and the board that it's letting me know that it can actually handle these things. So now let's actually go into the foot pads, because I know I already spoke about the concave foot pads and everything like that, but these foot pads are made of plastic, just like the Pint and I guess the Pint X, which means that there is a lot of feedback through the actual foot pads to your body. And one thing I noticed is there's a lot of these areas here, along with just that lower sidewall, that shorter sidewall that we now have with this larger wheel in the tire itself. That shorter sidewall is going to absorb less shock, less vibrations, and then you have the hard plastic foot pads, which are basically unforgiving. I started noticing that there were some aspects here, and you can see in that jump there, my foot actually skipped off the front of the foot pad about a half an inch forward. I was able to actually pull my foot back comfortably, but you could definitely feel a lot of what's going on under the board in your feet. And a lot of those little ruts and vibrations sometimes actually almost skip you off the board a little bit. And I kind of had a few close calls where I thought I was just going to lose it completely. I think maybe a better, softer tire maybe able to help resolve this situation. And then also maybe urethane front and rear pads. I don't know if there's anyone that's planning on developing a front pad, but maybe definitely a rear pad on there. I'm sure, you know, TFL and Craft and Ride and all those companies are going to be, you know, developing their own pads of some kind. But I think in combination with a softer compound tire and urethane or softer foot pads, that's going to make a huge difference in some of that shock absorption that I'm experiencing. Now you can see I just got off the trail, just did that run there. My heart is beating 1,000 miles a minute, and I am just loving how responsive this board is. A lot of people, they talk about just how stable the board feels. Now, it's not stable because necessarily the tire is, you know, a giant flat brick, kind of like the Vega from the XR that comes stock. That's a different type of stability that we're talking about. This one here, you get stability from the motor and you get stability from the ride modes. It's just super responsive, and because it's so responsive, you actually feel like there is more stability in the board. if that makes any sense. I don't feel like I'm hunting at all, which is really nice. And there's been a few times when I was riding, especially riding back in this direction, I end up taking out my phone and just trying to see what speeds I'm hitting. And I actually tried to push the limits of the board, and I found that 240 pounds, 235 pounds, around there, start hitting pushback around 18 and a half, 19 miles an hour. I am completely comfortable with that. I have personally no reason to ever really go beyond that. And the other interesting thing is, because the increased power, responsiveness, and everything of this board, and the feedback that I'm getting from the different ride modes of this board, it's increased my comfortability. My friends could tell you when I ride with them, I typically ask, how fast are we going? Are we going like 14, 15 miles an hour? Because I really do not know what the limits are of the board I'm riding whenever I'm riding the XR. I can't really feel if I'm pushing the board or not. With this board here, I find that, you can see I fell there. I was trying to do a 360 and I grinded the nose there. But with this board, I started noticing that I'm cruising comfortably around 17, 18 miles an hour. And that's just me cruising. You can see me here trying to get used to that tire profile again. And I do gotta say, coming from a pint and then going to an XR and trying a few different tires on there, I currently have a Trail Pro on there. I do gotta say that this tire almost feels like a mesh between, as far as the profile, not the hardness, the profile kind of feels like a mesh between what you would experience with a Trail Pro and a pint with a Hoosier on it. It's very responsive. There's a nice little profiled flat area in the middle by a little bit, so you do get some stability through there through actually getting that flat area in the tire. But then there's also a nice rounded profile around the sides that is not sharp, and you do feel like you could actually, you know, play with the board. It's nimble. You could turn it very easily. I noticed there's some spots on trails that I normally have a hard time doing a toe side turn, and I was able to really kind of get that board around and whip it around, and I didn't feel like I was fighting the board at all, which was absolutely awesome. But back to the tire has a very hard durometer. Now, again, because it has a lower sidewall, because of that increased hub size, that's going to translate into more vibrations and things being translated to your feet, to the rider. But also they incorporated a harder tire, and it makes sense for them to do so because, yeah, if you send your tire in to get a tire replacement, if you want to keep it as a future motion stock tire, they want that tire for the user to last a little bit longer. So a harder tire will last longer. I did lower the pressure down to 17 PSI from 20 where it came stock, and it still felt like it was a pretty hard tire to beat. Now, this tire is worlds of apart different than, I do gotta say, the stock pint tire and the stock Vega tire that the XR came with originally. I know people like those tires. Personally, I did not like those tires at all. And I feel like this tire is an acceptable, decent, pretty darn good tire for a stock tire. I know the aftermarket is just going to go crazy, and I'm very excited to see what the aftermarket's going to do tire-wise, because it's really going to elevate this tire and elevate the board as a whole. But I do got to say, the stock tire is not bad. The stock treaded tire is not bad, and that was a nice, pleasant surprise. It's just hard. It's just hard, so maybe over time through use, maybe it'll soften up a little bit. I'm not really sure. But it is hard, and it is something you notice. You are going to feel a lot of those bumps and vibrations. Now, again, I don't trick or anything like that, so this is coming from my skill level. Maybe people at a higher skill level may not like the tire completely at all. Not really sure what they are thinking, to be honest with you. Now, a lot of these little hills that I'm kind of hitting on the trail, I'm just like feeling like I'm driving a tank right now. It's just it's just climbing everything. There's no surging, there's no nothing. I'm not hearing any beeps. It's just absolutely amazing what they did with this board. Absolute beast. I'm in love. Okay, so I just want to show you some comparisons here because now we have simple stop. So this is the normal heel lift stop. You see I have a little bit of an issue there. I just got to get used to the board. And then we have simple stop, much like I experienced when I owned my Pint. You just come to a stop, lean back, and there it goes. It allows you to disengage. May not be for everybody, but definitely beginner friendly. So now let's compare the headlights. I know I did get some questions as to how bright are the lights. Now this is the XR under normal riding conditions in my garage, and you can see how it fades out. So now let's go over to the GT. Boom. Look at that. That is the GT. So let's actually go through real quick and let's compare the XR again. Let's go back to the XR. Let's see what that is like. Look at that. That's the XR. That's kind of what we're dealing with right now. And I noticed most of the light pattern was actually like just in front of the XR itself. And then back to the GT. Boom. Look at that. Absolutely insane. This is going to be a awesome board to ride with at night. All right, so hopefully that answered a lot of your questions, and hopefully you enjoyed my first look, my first ride with the Onewheel GT. It was extremely hard to hold out and make sure that I caught that moment on camera. But everyone, if you have any questions or anything you want me to check out on my GT, or something you want me to compare between the GT and the XR for the full review after I tested for a little bit, definitely leave it in the comment box below. Or if you know any cool features that maybe I missed or anything that I really should be looking at, definitely let me know in the comment box below. Everyone, stay safe, stay happy, and we'll catch you all next time.